Of the features of the 645-page bill released by House Democrat Socialists on as the leading indicator of their $3.5 trillion of desired spend they're trying to get done before the month is out, as we talked about with Steve Moore a bit yesterday. New brakes also for buying electric cars and trucks, of course, making Pell education grants completely tax-free, offering incentives to rehab homes in poor neighborhoods, provide new tax subsidies for hydrogen energy production, extending the monthly tax credit, $450 million for pre-K Head Start type programs that have shown no evidence of advancing early childhood development for 3 decades. But why should we stop?
Glorified babysitters.
Of course. This is Richard Neal, who's the Ways and Means chairman, trying to sort of soft pedal the hammering that the Democrat Socialists are trying to impose. And, of course, this is going to be paid for by the rich, raising taxes on capital gains, raising corporate taxes. Except it doesn't quite work that way, it turns out. Remember, these are multi-year blue sky spending plans, and the same thing with the tax policies. A report from the Joint Tax Committee shows the spending plan of the Democrat Socialists actually would increase taxes on those making as little as $30,000 a year starting in 2027. So here we go again. It's the age-old story that never seems to be learned by so many, which is there's just not enough money if you just tax the 1%. You can't get enough money for their spending appetites. The Wall Street Journal had a piece earlier this week. Confiscate every asset of every American billionaire. Still wouldn't cover the cost of just the next 2 legislative plans that have been advanced by Democrat Socialists. Talked about this before. Confiscate all the wealth in the top 10%. You couldn't run the government for more than a quarter. People just have no sense of scale here, but they don't need a sense of scale. All they need is to pay attention to their own financial situation. Just pay a little bit of attention. See your taxes go up and say, well, wait a second. Am I making more than $400,000 a year, as Biden said? Because Biden said those are the only people who would be taxed.
Right, he lied.
Right. Am I seeing my cost of living go up? And through inflation, my real take-home pay decline? Just pay attention to your situation. You don't need to think in the billions and trillions because you're going to pay in other ways, too. Plan green taxes, rules and fees on a new infrastructure bill, for example, mean it will cost you more to fuel your car, heat your home, buy food, buy anything made in a factory. And, oh, by the way, the capital gains tax, which is supposed to be a tax on the rich, more than half of all American workers now own stock, either through IRAs or 401ks and other retirement devices. Are they rich? Well, they would pay the same tax as the rich guy, long-term capital gains, if ideally they saw their IRA or 401k grow. By the way, when you talk about corporate taxes, big bad corporations. I mean, except those are all the corporations that fund the left. But okay. Study from 2016, noted by Forbes, finds owners, bear around 40% of state corporate income taxes, while employees bear 30 to 35%. So even though corporate taxes are not levied directly on workers, they still affect workers indirectly by lowering their wages. So it's a nice twofer. Get your wages lowered by increasing the corporate tax and get your wages lowered by inflation as a proximate result of the runaway spending. And you want to sign up for this. I know Chicago does. For more on this, pleased to be joined by our friend Don Boudreaux, who is an economist, author, professor, and co-director of the program on the American economy and globalization at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Don, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to be here, Dan and Amy.
So, anything you'd like to add to my summation? You're the trained, licensed economist. Anything you'd like to add to my layman summation of the tax and spend being proposed?
It's an excellent summary, but as you went down that list, I'm thinking to myself, wow, what fun it is to spend other people's money.
Oh, it's so exciting.
Yeah. But of course, the deeper truth is the one that you pointed out. all this other people's money that you think you're spending, there's not that much of it. There's not as much of it as you think there is, and there's not as much of it as is necessary to cover all these dream programs that you have. And look, Dan, even if, contrary to fact, the super wealthy had enough wealth to fund decades worth of government programs, where would that wealth come from if it's taxed or confiscated? It's going to come out of investment. When you take the taxes out of investment, you're going to reduce the amount of capital and tools that workers have to work with, and in that way, you'll reduce worker productivity and hence reduce wages. There is simply no way around the fact that these kinds of taxes are going to harm ordinary Americans and hit ordinary Americans very hard, as you described.
Well, and the other thing too here is, this all starts from the premise that all of these areas of spend are worthwhile and legitimate, and then it's just a question of how do we finance it. If we had all the money in the world, of course we do these things. If we had all the money in the world, or all the money that these appetites demand, still shouldn't do it, because we've been having this discussion for a couple of weeks now. Point to something that the government does where they're the primary administrator. I'm not talking about Operation Warp Speed, where they sort of incentivize the development by private companies of vaccines, but some outside of that, where they give way to the private sector, something the government actually administers, the Leviathan actually administers, that is an unmitigated success, that you say that is something we should replicate and scale across all the things that government attempts to do. I mean, there's just nothing.
Yeah, my late colleague, the great Walter Williams, always pointed out. He said, if you want to see how government actually operates, look at the public school system in inner cities, and that'll give you a good sense of the efficacy of government, how efficiently and well and wisely it spends money. Not very at all.
Well, is there any government program that has worked in your estimate?
Well, a lot of them work to transfer income from the majority of the people to special interest groups. Of course, that's not how they're sold. Someone might say, well, during wartime, when there's one overriding goal, like defeating the Nazis in World War II, you can say that worked. But in peacetime, I think the Great Society hasn't worked. The Great Society hasn't gotten rid of poverty by its own terms. Minimum wage statutes cause unemployment among low-skilled workers. The subsidies to firms, Solyndra is only the most common example now, often fail. You look at what government does. It is designed. Most of these programs are designed, although not advertised, but they're designed to line the pockets of interest groups with money taken from the broader public. And they certainly work at that goal. It's not the goal for which they are sold to the general public and to voters.
No, they create industries. They create rent seekers around the money that's being spent. But it's not about solving the problem. It's about sustaining the cottage industry that you've created out of whole cloth. And then this folds in public choice theory too. And I mean, just like I go back to like William F. Buckley and this was after I think it was President Clinton's first State of the Union address, where he said in reaction, I had to drop an ashtray on the ground to make sure gravity still existed after listening to this. And so I feel like we're in the same place here with what's being proposed and how it's being proposed. And it's just simple, like laws of economics. You don't need a degree. It's just, it's James Buchanan's public choice theory. People don't spend other people's money as judiciously as they spend their own.
I don't see how anyone can dispute that, but the fact seems to be that most people don't believe that or actually reject that proposition. And let me say one other thing about working. Sometimes people can government programs work. You can point to certain programs that sometimes seem to achieve their advertised objective. But another fact that's ignored is at what cost?
Right.
What we never see is what's foregone. So you might say, the space program worked. We actually, and it's a glorious engineering achievement. We put men on the moon and we returned them safely to the Earth. So in that sense, it worked. But at what cost? And I don't mean to demean the Apollo program, but so many other government programs are in that league. We see certain outcomes that we can point to and say, oh yeah, that worked. But at what cost? We don't see what we've given up. And that is a real problem.
No, absolutely. In the real world, you say you watch Michael Jordan play baseball, and you said, you know what, you should go back and play basketball. And
Yeah.
in with the world of
Yeah.
government, no matter how massive the failure is, the welfare states, poverty programs, K through 12 education, the it's always just more.
Yeah.
The solution is to scale it. We were just talking about that with respect to Illinois last hour, and it's the same thing at the federal level.
Yeah. 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 I think Milton Friedman, the late Milton Friedman, had this great saying. He said, to getting back to the point about spending your own money, and no one spends money as well as the person who's spending his own money on himself. But the worst is when someone is spending other people's money on someone else. Which is what government does. It's spending other people's money on third parties, which is just completely bonkers as a means of trying to assure that resources are used efficiently and wisely.
And I mean, just again, here, do the laws of economics, does our understanding of human nature still persist? With respect to COVID policy, which I know you recently wrote about, I mean, do people still respond to incentives? Is that what we see happening in the era of COVID?
Uh, we see people responding to fear, which is what distresses me. I see some people trying to resist these COVID rules, and in a sense, that's responding to incentives. People want to get back to living something akin to a normal life. But certainly politicians respond to the incentives that they've learned that they can't, by stoking fear, by creating hysteria in the general public will become more amenable to being corralled and bridled. And so there's an eagerness, as I see it, on the part of a lot of public officials to stoke the fear, to undersell the successes of that we've had over the past 18 months of reducing the dangers of the disease, and to continue to overhype its dangers, to ignore the fact that it largely is a danger to very old people rather than to the general public. And so the incentives that these political officials have is to keep the hysteria going so that they can keep their power going. And unfortunately, too many ordinary people continue to fall for the misleading, overly hyped hysteria about COVID dangers.
And they fall for the I'm doing it for the kids, I'm doing it for you, I'm a nice guy, I'm a nice gal, I'm selfless. This is all about you, not about me line too. I mean, it's remarkable.
So much of it is signaling. And of course, we all know the way in which these signals have divided along party and ideological lines. But I still see people here in Northern Virginia, where I live, just outside of D.C., young people, young adults, double masked, wearing the face shield and walking around with latex gloves. It's as if they think they're going to die the moment they come into contact with this monster. And I wonder, and I'm sure these people think of themselves as they probably are highly educated. I think they think of themselves as being especially wise and especially sensitive. I look at them and I think, wow, you're just especially uninformed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you have to, you remind them, eventually someday you are going to die of something, but sadly it's not going to be COVID, because you have a 99.995% chance of surviving if you do indeed get it. But they're so lobotomized. It's like a cult. I don't even know how to describe it. But in Chicago, people are wearing masks outside now.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It is indeed like a cult. This is a true story. I saw about 2 weeks ago a guy in Northern Virginia driving. A young guy, I could tell by his hair. He was driving a convertible, and the convertible was open. He was alone in the car, and he's wearing a mask as he's driving in his convertible.
Yeah, that's
you
when
see
you pull
motorcyclists doing the same thing.
That's when you pull up and say, "Hey, you should put a face shield on."
Yeah, that's
hey,
crazy.
before I let you go, I got a homework assignment for you. You can task one of your minions, one of the interns at the Mercatus Center. I like this. Your colleague there, Tyler Cohen, posted this at his Marginal Revolution blog. The Ig Nobel Prizes, Ig Nobel. The one in economics went to an economist named Pavlo Blavatsky for his study of obesity of politicians in post-Soviet countries as correlated to their corruption. He looked at frontal face images from 2017 of 299 politicos from 15 post-Soviet states, estimated the body mass index using a computer vision algorithm, and the results suggest that the physical characteristic of politicians, such as their body mass index, can be used as a proxy variable for political corruption. So I'd like to do that for American politicians too. So basically, the indication is the fatter you are, the more corrupt you are. And I think there may be something to that. If it's good enough for post-Soviet republics, it's Republican post-Soviet republic politicos probably has some application for some of the Soviet politicos we have in Congress and elsewhere. What do you think?
Yeah, because as you get older, you tend to gain weight, and the longer you're in politics, the more skilled you become at milking the system. And I think that's probably part of how where the correlation comes from.
Yeah, I like it,
very
though.
Interesting study.
I like it. Yeah, if you see a fat politician, like, I don't know, the Illinois governor, boy, he's off the index.
Yeah,
he's off the corruption scale. Yeah,
he's got to be four bills.
But let's also be clear. There are some thin ones that are also.
Oh, of course. It's just a matter of degree. Yes, of course. Yes, and then there are outliers. Yes, very in shape, like Gavin DeShure, of course. Don Boudreaux, American economist, author, professor, co-director of the program on the American economy and globalization at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Don, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Hi, it's Amy Jacobson. Wondering why, when it comes to hearing aids, so many people refuse to get tested despite the cognitive risk they're running. I think they're worried about looking old. Is that it? If you're afraid hearing aids will make you look old, well, I've got a news flash for you. Hearing Health Center just introduced high-tech hearing aids that look exactly like the earbuds you see everyone wearing. Just like the ones I wear listening to music. They're the newest sensation in hearing. No one knows whether you're listening to music, talking on the phone, or enhancing the voices around you. They're rechargeable and have brilliant sound for both music and speech. Call 833-GO-HEARING for an appointment to try them and get a free hearing test in Chicago, Oak Brook, Naperville, Highland Park, or Park Ridge. Hearing Health Center will donate $20 in your name to the Alzheimer's Foundation when you do. That's 833-GO-HEARING or book online at 833-GOHEARING.com.
Text Madigan was skinny. I said there are outliers. Yes. There's obviously
and short.
Yes, right. That would be another interesting study. Height and corruption too would just be interesting as indicators. Again, these are Ig Nobel prizes, but they're fun, and so we have to have fun, particularly when we talk about economics, particularly when we talk